Here is a number that should worry the Kremlin more than any single drone strike. 3 Ukrainian officials, speaking to CBS News on June 17, 2026, confirmed that Russia is running short on S-300 interceptor missiles, not Iskanders, not Kinzhals. The missiles meant to shoot incoming threats out of the sky over Moscow itself. This is not a story about one bad night for Russian air defense. This is a country quietly running out of a weapon it cannot replace fast enough, while the number of incoming targets keeps climbing every week. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why the math behind Russia's air defense no longer adds up. The SA system at the center of this story. The US-300 is not new. Development started in the Soviet Union in the late 1960s, and the system entered operational service in 1978. For nearly 50 years, it has formed one of the core layers protecting Russian airspace against cruise missiles, aircraft, and now drones. In 2000, at peak deployment, Russian air defense forces fielded approximately 1,900 Dows-300 launchers across the country. By 2017, that number had already dropped to around 800 as older variants were retired, and the newer S-400 took over the premium roles. Throughout this war, Russia has leaned on newer systems as well. The S-350 Vitязь, the S-400 Triumph, the Panzer S-1 for short-range point defense. But the S-300 has stayed in the fight the entire time, because Russia does not have enough of the newer systems to cover everything that needs covering. Moscow alone requires multiple overlapping layers. So do St. Petersburg, Belgorod, Rostov, the Crimean Bridge, the refineries, the rail hubs. The S-300 fills the gaps. The S-400 cannot cover everywhere at once. According to 2025 estimates from Ukrainian intelligence, Russia held more than 400 combined interceptors for its S-300 PM and S-400 systems. Officials speaking to CBS would not give a current number. They only confirmed a clear reduction. 2 compounding problems explain why, and they are working against Russia at the same time. Problem 1. The stockpile is bleeding from both ends. Russia has started repurposing S-300 missiles as surface-to-surface ground attack weapons against Ukrainian cities. Engineers install GPS or GLONASS navigation modules on interceptors originally designed to fly upward toward aircraft. The same missile that was built to defend Russian skies is now being fired horizontally into Kharkiv and Zaporizhzhia. Ukrainian intelligence data shows production of these repurposed strike missiles roughly doubling year on year. More than 200 units were converted in 2025. More than 480 are planned for 2026, running at close to 50 units per month right now. Each one of those conversions permanently removes a round from the air defense stockpile. Russia is raiding its own shield to keep the bombing campaign going, and those missiles do not come back. At the same time, Ukraine's drone campaign keeps burning through whatever interceptors remain. Rob Lee, a Russian military expert at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, put it plainly to NBC News. Russia's air defense missiles are being used up at an unsustainable rate because Ukraine can produce more deep strike drones than Russia can, in some cases, produce air defense missiles to stop them. Read that again. Ukraine's drone factories are outpacing Russia's interceptor factories. That is not a temporary gap. That is a structural problem. Problem 2. Russia cannot easily rebuild the stockpile. A Ukrainian official told CBS that Russia lacks key components for new interceptor production, specifically guidance seekers and control modules that were previously sourced from Western and Chinese manufacturers. Sanctions have choked that supply chain in ways that are proving far harder to work around than the components needed for simpler weapons. The core issue is semiconductors. Russia's domestic chip industry is stuck at roughly 65 nanometer process technology. The guidance seekers in modern interceptor missiles need far more advanced chips, produced at 3 to 5 nanometer nodes that Russia cannot manufacture domestically at any competitive scale. You cannot build a precision interceptor seeker on hardware from 2005. Sanctions evasion networks running through Central Asia and Southeast Asia help Russia get some components through, but not at the volume or speed the defense industry needs to rebuild depleted stockpiles. The warning signs were visible months before this story broke publicly. In November 2025, observers documented Russian crews loading OSA AKM launchers with outdated 9M33M naval interceptors, rounds designed for ship-based air defense, not ground-based operations. By December, the Royal United Services Institute published an analysis concluding that Russia was expending air defense interceptors faster than it was producing them. That finding came from one of Britain's most rigorous defense research institutions. By April 2026, Russian military bloggers, people who normally celebrate Russian military capability, were openly writing about Panzer shortages. At that point, the problem was no longer deniable, even domestically. The cost problem nobody is talking about. A Ukrainian long-range strike drone costs somewhere between $50,000 and $200,000, depending on the variant. An S-300 interceptor costs between $1 and $2 million. An S-400 interceptor, the 48 N6 series, costs considerably more. Ukraine launched more than 500 drones in a single overnight wave on June 18th. Even at a 90% interception rate, Russia fired somewhere between 400 and 500 interceptors that night alone. Run that math across a month of sustained operations, and you get a picture of an exchange rate that Russia cannot sustain indefinitely. Ukraine is forcing Russia to spend millions of dollars worth of missiles every single week to intercept hardware that costs a fraction of that to build. The S-300 shortage is the first visible sign that this exchange rate is starting to matter at the stockpile level. But this looks like in the sky over Moscow. On the night of June 18th, Russian air defense reported shooting down 555 Ukrainian drones in a single overnight wave, with close to 200 intercepted approaching Moscow alone. That figure was roughly double the drones Russia itself launched at Ukraine the same night. Even at the claimed 90% interception rate, the handful that got through hit Moscow's largest oil refinery in the Kapotnya district for the second time in 3 days. 2 weeks earlier, on June 3rd, Ukrainian drones flew over 600 miles to strike an oil terminal in St. Petersburg, Putin's hometown, less than 24 hours before he opened his signature economic forum there. 2 firefighters died. Flights were disrupted. Putin had already scaled back the annual Victory Day parade in Moscow earlier this year over fears of exactly this kind of attack. A world leader adjusting his own capital's parade route because of drone threats from a smaller neighbor is not a detail to skip past. None of these strikes required Ukraine to defeat the US-300 in a straight technological fight. They only needed enough volume to outlast the interceptors available on a given night, and the stockpile data suggests that volume gets easier to sustain as the weeks go on. A fair counterpoint, not every analyst agrees this is a death spiral for Russian air defense. Some assessments, including from the Institute for the Study of War, argue that Russia's broader missile production for offensive weapons, Iskander ballistic missiles, Kh-101 cruise missiles, Kinjal hypersonics, remains sustainable for several more years through sanctions evasion networks and supplemental supply from Iran and North Korea. Russia can reportedly launch up to 100 ballistic missiles per month at Ukraine while maintaining stable stockpile levels, according to Ukraine's own defense intelligence. That may be true for offensive weapons. But the evidence from CBS, RUSI, and multiple Ukrainian intelligence officials is specifically about the interceptor line, the dedicated air defense missile, and for a structural reason. Interceptors depend on precision guidance components that sanctions have made far harder to procure than a basic rocket motor or explosive warhead. Offensive missiles can tolerate cruder guidance. An interceptor chasing a fast-moving drone at altitude cannot. Russia still has more capable systems in the fight. The US-400 remains operational. Ukrainian intelligence was careful to note that Russia is not defenseless, but the US-300 filled specific geographic coverage gaps that a limited number of S-400 batteries cannot fill everywhere simultaneously. When those gaps widen, drones get through. The footage from Kapotnya is what that looks like. What comes next? Ukraine's deep strike drone production keeps growing in volume and sophistication, with newer models flying faster and farther than anything from 2 years ago. Russia's interceptor stockpile keeps shrinking, partly from combat use, partly from converting those same interceptors into offensive weapons. The sanctions-constrained guidance components needed to rebuild the stockpile are not coming back online anytime soon. None of that requires a single dramatic battle to matter. It just needs to keep producing nights like June 18th, where enough drones slip through a thinning network to set the same refinery on fire twice in 72 hours, while the man who started this war adjusts his schedule around the assumption that his own capital is no longer fully secure. Force Vector Close, a 50-year-old missile system designed in the 1960s to defend Soviet cities against American bombers, is now the thinning line between Ukrainian drones and the Russian capital. The stockpile is confirmed shrinking. The production line is confirmed component constrained. The refinery fires are what the gap looks like from the outside, supply and demand playing out over the skies of Moscow. So here's the question for you. Do you think Russia can close this interceptor gap before it becomes a real strategic turning point? Comment 1 below. If you think the gap only gets wider from here and the refinery strikes are just the beginning? Comment 2. The math is now public. Watch the refineries to see who is right. Stay sharp.